Mia. Okay.
Mhm.
I met Mia through a friend, Emily, a mutual friend from Space on Space magazine. Make sure to follow Emily. Um, and I was just really fascinated by the work that Mia does with consent, which is like a word that I've heard, but I never really heard much about it being a work that's done like, or, I feel like there's so much breadth to the topic that I didn't even realize. And I feel like you kind of like introduced me to this idea, like somehow in our conversation, like we did not consent to capitalism. And my mind was like, like, whoa, this is crazy. And so I asked Mia to come on IG Live with me to talk about the work that they do. Mia's pronouns are they, them. And so, and just to like talk about this topic, because I do talk a lot about in my work as a financial coach about, as someone who personally hates capitalism, but also is like, well, we're in this system. So I also don't want to be living paycheck to paycheck. I want to have some financial security. I want my clients and my community, my friends and family to have financial security. So how do we navigate those two? And I feel like you, Mia, are great to kind of like discuss that and dig into that and give us some insight so we can all figure out how to balance that. So maybe to start, like, if you could introduce yourself and like, what is the work that you do? Maybe even how you got into it.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Mia Schachter. Them, and I found consent really through training to be an intimacy coordinator, which is essentially a job very similar to a stunt coordinator, but for sex scenes and nudity, so people comfortable and safe, and that the scenes are replicable and realistic and all that stuff. So get exposed to consent in this way that, like, through this like trauma lens and like thinking about boundaries and like ways that I'm putting my own boundaries and all this stuff. And I just felt my mind like expanding, and I was like, why am I only just now at almost 30 years old, 3 years ago, like, and like, why isn't it widely available? So one of the things that I knew immediately I wanted to do was to make sure that it was like accessible, digestible, and not a gate-kept topic. Because I had remedial consent education that was like no means no, inspiring enthusiasm, and all this stuff. And there was just something about it where I was like, this doesn't really speak to like what's actually practical in my lived daily experience and sexual experiences. Like I felt particularly enthusiastic about trying something when I've never done it before. Like often there's a little bit of nervousness and anxiety and fear about something. So I was like, I don't know about this stuff, And so learning about it, as an intimacy coordinator, I wanted to start teaching it. So I started teaching classes for actors and classes for directors, and it was still like very centered on the entertainment industry. And then COVID happened, and so I was like, I'm not comfortable like not working. Like I'm like want to be busy, often to a fault, where I deal with a lot of like burnout and like working on like preventing burnout and overworking myself and all that. Hey, Junya. And so I started teaching online during the pandemic, and I was like, I posted it on my Instagram. It was a Instagram at the time, and I was like, I'm going to be doing this like $10. Anyone who wants to come can. And 10 people signed up. I was shocked. And then I was like, maybe I'll offer it again next week, and then 10 more people. And then it seems like we need like what comes after this. Class, so like we need like a level 2, and then I developed a level 2, and next thing I knew, I was like running this business I didn't intend to start, that allowed me to like move out of my parents and like pay my bills and all these things.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it really like took took off. It kind of snowballed, became like, and it also, like, the more I was doing it, the more I was noticing the synchronicities were happening more often. And there was this way I was like my body on a deeper level, and I was connecting with more people with these, and I was like, navigating living with my parents in a way that I was like, actually, this is going pretty well, like it was just affecting everything in my life. And so then, it grew into like the Instagram page that you see now, and the sort of, I run a school. I run a school online. I'm starting to think about like what it would be like to have like a brick and mortar space in LA. And, like I had to hire an assistant. I was like, oh my God, I have to figure out like payroll, all this stuff. So, and then I bought Space on Space at Civil Coffee in Highland Park, and I read the interview with you, and I was so impressed with how you talk about money. And I have a coach who I adore, and I was like, who are like really aligned. I wonder if they know each other. And so then when I met you at the launch party, I was really glad that we got to connect. And then, as you said, like our conversation really started to quickly veer into like, we don't, and not just capitalism, I mean, we don't consent all these systems that we're born into, whether it's the gender binary or white supremacy or patriarchy, capitalism, all like, we don't even consent to being born, like we're just, we arrive. And then deal with like what there is. And so one of the things that I think that brings up that's like incredibly complicated is this question of like, is full consent ever possible? And I think that there's, about my sort of the way that I think about consent and the way that I teach it as anti-binary. And there's binary there that it's either you consent or you don't. Really think that that's realistic. Like there's, I love my job, but I'm always going to wonder, like, would I do it if I didn't have to pay my bills? And maybe I would do it, but I certainly wouldn't do it the way to do it. And there's things also like, even the gender binary, it's like, do I present the way that I present because it is like entirely of me, or is it a reaction to what I have been told I'm supposed to dress like? And this is nature versus nurture question. And there's simply no answer. Like there is no answer. Like we can guess and we can speculate, but even if there were one answer, we will never be able to know for sure. There's just no way.
Well, this is really making me think, okay, so like this thing of like nature versus nurture and like what we consent to and how we're raised, how do you think that affects us in our beliefs around money? How do you think there are ways that we have certain beliefs around money based on how we're raised that we don't even realize that we didn't consent to, right?
I think I first sort of like lay a little bit of groundwork around the word consent, because I think it gets used in many different ways. I use it in a couple different ways, and even sometimes in ways that it's really used, but like I wouldn't necessarily like the way that we're using the word consent is really talking about agreeing. Like we don't agree to capitalism. And then consent and permission often get conflated. Permission is something that happens in the moment, but it doesn't mean that consent is being practiced or that consent is taking place. And so when I think about consent and capitalism, it's like I agree to capitalism. I can strive to practice consent as best as I can within capitalism. And that's have to do with like all the things that consent requires, such as like, you know, attunement to the other person, making an agreement and then updating the paying attention to someone's like nonverbal cues, checking in with my body, you know, mindfulness, like all these things are part of practicing consent. So when we're talking about like agreeing or not agreeing to a system, the systems make it very, the systems create like obstacles and barriers to practicing consent.
Well, that's even making me think, because as you're saying that, I was like, oh, this is like why talking about money with each other is so important, because how can we consent to certain things when we don't even have the information? Like the fact that like, okay, so many people get paid differently than their coworkers.
Right, but they're not talking about it.
Yeah, and so it's like, they can be like, well, you know, the employer could be like, well, you consented, you know, in a way, or you agreed to the salary. And they're like, well, yes, but I didn't have all the information.
Right.
So if I knew that this person was making more than me, then I wouldn't have agreed to this or consented to it, or, you know, and, you know, we want to phrase it, or you want to phrase it. But yeah, like this is why. And so it seems like capitalism is keeping us from being able to even consent to within our involvement in it, by withholding information and keeping us from communicating about it, you know?
Yes, and I think capitalism, the way that marketing occurs within capitalism is also to like create and then highlight over and over a lack or something that you should, that capitalism would suggest that you should feel insecure about, you know, like body, for example. Like, you know, razor companies would be nowhere if people liked their body hair. But the marketing that they put out there is like, hey, did you know that there's something about you that's wrong and disgusting? Let me fix it if you just give me your money. And so, like, relying on the gender binary to reinforce this idea. They're relying on like heteronormative, you know, stereotypes around love and beauty standards and all these, and like white centric standards, you know, all like able, you know, blah, blah, blah. Like that's how they're selling their product. They're relying on us to believe them. That we don't have things that we need. So this question around, I mean, I guess I should maybe talk about just my lens, like where I'm coming from on this. I'm, you know, my grandparents are like, they've fought in World War II. They the States during the Great Depression. They're Jewish.
Sorry, what was that last part? They're what?
They're Jewish.
Okay.
So, you know, a lot of like ancestral trauma around money, a lot of expectations around money. So white, obviously. And I grew up, my family is probably like not exactly upper middle class, but like upper within middle class, like towards the upper. So that just gives like a little background as far as like where I'm speaking from when it comes to money. And there was definitely like some secrecy. Hey, Jim. Some secrecy, like growing up around money. Like my parents wouldn't really show me the most information that I got was like as I was getting like I think around middle school time. My dad started showing me like the bill when we would go out for dinner, and he would show it to me just kind of like, you know, get an allowance and you're going to start going out with your friends and you're going to start driving and stuff like that, and I want you to have a sense of like, this is how much stuff costs, you know, this restaurant or this restaurant or this restaurant, like this is how much stuff costs. And what came up for me that is, you know, it's interesting how like people have different reactions to that kind of thing. I was immediately like, it was the way that I became aware of what I had that other people did not have.
Oh, wow.
So it showed up and it manifested in me as like a lot of guilt that I then spent many, many years, like unpack, because that guilt was leading me right into the trap of thinking like, in order to be anti-capitalist, or in order to, you know, like level the playing fields or whatever, like this was like the narrative in my head, I had to not make any money. You know, I had to like be a sort of starving artist. And if I wasn't, then I wasn't living in line with my values. And it was this, it's still a capitalist mindset because it's based in this idea of scarcity. It's based in the idea I have stuff that other people don't have stuff.
Yes.
And it's just not a zero sum game like that. Like there, it's not, you know, it's not, you know, I think about this like food distribution, not an issue of scarcity, distribution problem.
Ooh, that is really key, I think, and that's the thing. I that mindset is what most of the clients that come to me, because it's mostly progressive women who are activists or like social workers, and so they want to make the world a better place, and then feel guilty managing their money because they're like, if I have this financial freedom, if I'm debt free, have money in the bank, if I like think about money, then I'm just like the 1%. And from, you're right, that scarcity mindset, I think that was really key, which I love how you pointed out, like that it's not that zero sum game. It's not that, well, if I have it, somebody else won't. It's a, how do we distribute it? And I always like love to say this is like, there's so much wealth, that like abundance in this earth, that there's enough for everyone to eat well, to live well, to have shelter, you know, to live a comfortable life. But the problem is, like you said, it's not distributed equally, and it's not, not everyone has the same access, right? So, oh my gosh. So how did you start to reconcile that, to get to the place where you realized, okay, it's okay to like be comfortable with money, to have money. And how do you recognize this with with wanting to challenge and fight capitalism?
Well, I mean, a series of events. You know, I used to work in the theater, and I was doing that in New York for a while. I was doing like theater and visual performance art, economics business, and things that happened in the theater area of my life that like eventually caused me to leave the theater was like, I had two experiences with two playwrights, you know, kind of maniacal playwrights. One who was total, and it was like right before like the Me Too erupted. You know, the Me Too movement has been around for a long time, but like in 2015, like the Harvey Weinstein articles came out, like took off into.
Yes.
And so like the summer before that, I worked with this playwright who was super creepy to me, and I was assistant directing his short play, and he was super famous. So I was like, okay, like my career, you know, like here we go. Like this is my moment in my career. And then not only was it super gross, but my payment for rehearsal was a 1-month Metro card.
What?
Then I went to a little party, a gathering of theater people that I was involved with in the like downtown sort of alt experiment in New York. I had made friends with several people who like were involved in theater companies, and you know, they were all a little bit older than me, in my late 20s time, and they were 40s. Upstairs neighbors in my building who I got involved with their company. And so I went to this like little show that they were hosting in the apartment, and there was this playwright there that I so admired. Like I was like, she runs this theater company, you know, she puts plays that are really meaningful to me. I was like, this is like, if I could have that career, like that was like my aspirational career.
Yeah.
And then she gets on stage where she's getting interviewed as part of the show, and she's in her 40s, and she's about living in Bushwick with 3 roommates and none of them could afford cheese.
Oh.
So there I am at like 27, and I was like, I don't think I can do this anymore.
Yeah.
Like if that is that is like what I hope, that's what I'm aspiring to.
Yeah.
You know? And I went downstairs and I cried. Like I went back down to my apartment and I just sobbed myself to sleep. I was like, I don't think I can keep doing that.
Yeah.
Odds that I'm going to become like a Broadway playwright. Like it's not, there's no money here. No money to make.
Or there is money to be made, but it's not being distributed equally.
Right.
Because playwrights making a shit ton of money.
Yes.
And others that are making nothing, which is fucked up.
Right. And then even the people who are making a lot of money, like even the people who are making money but aren't like Broadway playwrights, they're constantly writing grant applications. You know, you have to run a nonprofit, you know, in order to like get your art made. And I was like, good fucking Lord, like I'm set out for this. Hey, Cam.
Well, I do think it's like maybe too, even the system, maybe there's like producers that are making more, maybe there's like roles that do get the money, or just like there are people that could put more funding into the arts and make it very easy to access that money, but they choose not to, you know.
And the philanthropy model is like wiki to me also. You know, there was like so much about it where I was like, I think I'm done. And then when I moved home to Los Angeles in 2018, I was like, I'm going to write for TV. Like that's, and it really was where I was like, you know, I had my first year making 6 figures, and I was like, holy moly, the way that this has freed me up. Like it was 2 things. I wonder how often you encounter this. It was on the one hand, it was like, oh my God, mental health is better. I take care of myself. You know, I don't have to feel guilt around buying like a $6 latte. I can have to eat. I can get a massage. But it was like, it was loosening up my strings enough to the point where I was like, this is comfy. And at the same time, on the other hand, I was like, I still can't afford a down payment on a house. I still can't afford to get a new car. I still can't afford to like turn down work in order to travel. I still can't do all, you know, I was like, whoa, I think it was like $102,000 that year. You know, it was like just over. And I was like, this is so fucked up that the improvements that are happening in my life are like my stress levels are way down. My mental improved. I can afford to take care of myself, and yet still cannot afford, and I am not going to be able to unless I have many, many, many years like this in a row. Like it's still not gonna give the like life that I want. And so that's really fucked up. And like what can I do about that, and how do I sort of make sure that other people have access?
I definitely think your experience is super common. I think there's like a couple reasons that happens. Some like you're, because maybe people, even though they make a lot of money, they still don't have access to like an affordable cost of living because of whatever. So that is a reason that some people make 6 figures and then are still struggling. And then there's other reasons where so many people still struggle even when they drastically increase their income, because all their money trauma is self-sabotaging them is like another reason. Like I've seen people is like, well, because they're so used to the scarcity that they had maybe growing up, especially people who grew up poor experience this a lot, where then they are afraid that they're going to lose it. So they spend it as soon as they have it, because their fear of like, well, if I don't spend it now, I'm going to lose it somehow. And so we have to kind of break down and really honestly do like therapy around all the trauma that they've experienced, so they are able to release those beliefs from their childhood around money that just like literally follow them. So there's like so many reasons, like, and that's the thing is too, like because like for me, my cost of living is so low in LA because I'm in a rent controlled apartment that I'm not supposed to be living in. So like, and so like for me, if I was making 102 living in LA, I'd be like rolling in it, right? But then not everyone has access to those networks too. And part of it, I'm very lucky that like, because of like the communities that I've lived in, like my mom is also in a rent controlled apartment. We have networks of people that have really helped each other out and been like, hey, get into this place now before the rent. And our neighborhood, I live in Echo Park, and our neighborhood, when we moved to this area, was a lot cheaper, and now it's gentrified. And so if someone like, this where my struggle about buying a house, because I'm like, I don't want to move out of Echo Park, but I can afford to buy a house in Echo Park, but I don't want to move half an hour or more away, or even 15 minutes away, because I love that I can walk to my mom's apartment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so complicated, figuring out, well, and that's like where some of these laws that we don't even consent to is like, if rent control it's a good thing, but it's so limiting that it doesn't actually help as many people as it should, right? Mm-hmm. So this is all super duper complicated. But so I'm wondering, you mentioned earlier some awesome like tips around consent, and like, how do you think that those can apply to like, say, this work of personal finance, or to an individual in their life trying to figure out like how to practice consent within capitalism? How do those apply?
Well, there's sort of two things coming to mind. Like, one is like, I've worked really hard and had to get super creative around building my in a way that it feels anti-capitalist, but within the reality that I still live in a capitalist system.
Yeah.
And, like, still have to make money. And I'm trying to make money that allows me to like flourish and not just like barely make it. And there are many, many ways that I do go into that one. But to answer the question, the other thing is that a lot of what I think capitalism relies on in order to keep the money in the of few is this separation between our minds and our bodies, and that is baked into industrialized medicine.
Oh my God.
And so and psychiatry stuff. Oh, it's hard to see, huh?
Thanks for letting
it. Thank you for telling us that.
In the Confident Money Club, and also knows Emily. That's how I met Jamie.
Can it tell me if my audio is better now?
It might still be a little bit choppy.
I wonder why. My Wi-Fi signal is...
I think you're a little better now.
I can also put on headphones.
That might help.
But that way the whole time.
I definitely noticed you were a little choppy earlier, but I could hear everything.
Okay.
So.
All right.
Sorry, I probably should have said something sooner, but I was like, well, I can hear everything. So.
Okay. There's feedback.
Headphones may help with that.
I wonder why. Okay.
Everyone's just running social media or businesses on social media. And that's making me even think is like, we like in terms of like what we consent to in capitalism is like we get fed like things like Instagram. It's like, and it's where, it's like free resources, like great, awesome. Hi, Jamie. And, you can run your business and it's like an awesome resource. But then, after you've gotten used to it and you build your business around it, all of a sudden they start feeding you ads. And then they feed you more ads. Mm-hmm. And by that time, you're so dependent on it that, like, you can't just, like, switch to something else. Or you get dependent on having it because that's your network and that's how you connect with people. And, yeah, that's just the way society works. And then we're fed ads, like, like Instagram used to not have ads. And now it's like every stories is sponsored. And so it's like, we didn't consent to that. But it's like, but they're like, well, but you're getting this free service. And it's like, well, but you do kind of like manipulate us into becoming dependent on it. So then you can force us. I don't know.
Well, and we've become the product. Like, we now are the product. Like, originally Instagram was the product, but now we are the product that Instagram sells to advertisers. And then they don't want to. So then people who are trying to sell stuff through Instagram, like me and friends of mine, like, if we don't buy ads, they don't promote, our stuff gets buried in the algorithm.
Yes.
Okay. So you asked about like practicing consent within capitalism. And I was saying that one of the things that capitalism counts on, and like marketing counts on, in order to keep money in the hands of the few, is this mind-body split. So it's like this really old, outdated idea that has been entirely debunked, but still sort of makes its way into, like, you know, pop science as though this is real, and it's not. And it's promoted by industrialized medicine, this idea that you have a mind and a body and that they're two distinct things. Yes. So a lot of consent work is about repairing and healing that rupture. And I found a lot of consent stuff was really resonating with me because of my autoimmune issues. And what I was noticing was the ways that I was pushing my own boundaries, because I had internalized this idea that I had a mind that was in control and a body that needed to submit. So there was a lot of, like, you know, my body was communicating all these things to me, like, hey, you're not comfortable right now, or hey, like, that food doesn't feel good to me, or hey, this situation doesn't feel safe. And my brain, my conscious brain, was saying, shut up, everyone's doing it, you know, don't you want to be like everyone else and eat the pizza or whatever, and or, you know, wear the makeup or shave your legs, and or have sex, or, you know, things that really are not feeling great to you in this moment. And so a lot of the consent work that I've done, and a lot of, like, what informs my practice and how I teach it, is this idea of, like, repairing that relationship between your mind and your body, so that you're thinking about it again as like a you know, a holistic a system where they are not separate entities. You know, you have neurons in your brain, you have more neurons in your gut, you have more serotonin in your gut than you have in your brain. A lot of mental health is, like, rooted in the gut, and a lot of mental health issues are rooted in inflammation. They come from inflammation, and one of the quickest ways to get inflamed is through the gut. So like, a lot of my health healing, like my physical healing, was really intimately tied with, like, emotional healing, mental healing, and repairing that rupture. So when I'm thinking about practicing consent within capitalism, I'm thinking about that process of getting back in touch with my body, really listening to my body, understanding what it's trying to say, making, you know, healing, like, inner child work, attachment wound healing, you know, all these things that will allow me to actually listen to myself and, like, hear how I'm feeling, and what is comfortable and what is safe and what I actually want. And as I said, like, you cannot fully, like, determine, do I genuinely want this because of, is it inherent or is it, you know, nurtured? And I don't really think that it's worth trying to figure that out past a certain point. You know, like, my desires are my desires. If they came from a movie that I saw when I was a kid, okay, like, I'd have to deal with the reality that that's now my desire. But that process of, like, getting back in touch with your body, of listening to yourself, of, like, of checking in, you know, of not gaslighting yourself, like, that's how I think we can work towards practicing consent within capitalism.
That's making me think of, like, there's all kinds of different ways I think that can be applied. One thing I think of, I have friends who have been, like, trying to convince to quit their jobs for a long, because they, like one of my best friends, she gets sick constantly. She was, like, you know, in the hospital because I know, like, the job is just, and it's like if she would, well, if she were to like listen, if we were to listen to our bodies, sometimes our bodies are going to tell us, hey, you need to quit this job. It's toxic. It's abusive, you know?
Right.
And part of that, I think, is like we have to pair listening to our bodies with really working on that scarcity mindset that we talked about earlier, because I've seen people be like, well, I can't quit this job because what if? And I'm like, there are so many opportunities out there that just because this, you know, feels secure doesn't
Mm-hmm.
that it's the right, that it's your only option, you know.
Right.
There are lots of options, and if we don't look, we'll never know. And so sometimes it's even hard to look because we feel so trapped in that, like the system that capitalism makes us feel trapped, right?
Mm-hmm.
Feel like, you know, and that's where like jobs make us feel like, well, you should be lucky, you know, you feel lucky, you should be thankful that you're getting a paycheck. And it's like, no, there's lots of jobs out there, there's lots of opportunities, like we talked about earlier, there's lots of money and abundance in the world, you know.
Mm-hmm.
To at least try, you know, see what else is out there. You'd be surprised. And I've had so many of my clients in my group program get, like, my group program's like 7 or 8 people usually, and every single round at least one person has got a new job making more money than they were before. And that's like a small group, and my group program started during the pandemic, so
Mm-hmm.
well, at least one if not two each round. Like that just shows you how much, oh, I like that GJ said secure doesn't mean safe, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
And then it's also making me think of like how we can do this, of like even doing purchasing things is like, oh, but you know, especially I work with a lot of people around emotional spending, which is something that I struggle with a lot, especially
Mm.
when I was a union organizer, especially at the beginning, the first few years. I was, you know, I moved to Philadelphia straight out of college. It's a stressful job being a union organizer. You're working long hours. And moving to a new city, I was super lonely. And so it was just like work all the time. And then my one day off, I'd be like, well, I'm going to just go shopping and eating out because I just need to.
Mm-hmm.
And, but the reality is, then that was making my situation worse because I got into all this credit card debt. And so realizing that you know, that, I talk about this all the time, the self-care industry is like
Mm-hmm.
not self-care, you know, it's just
Yeah.
them advertising to us and getting us to spend our money. So we're constantly indebted to them and in that cycle. And so this make me think is like when you're dealing with emotional shopping is actually often if we listen to our gut. And I would say this, you know, like some emotional shopping, it's okay to emotionally shop, right? And especially if you have the money for it, you know, it's not like a black and white bad thing. Like there are days when it's like I have a bad day and I have a restaurant that I like to go to get a specific pasta dish,
Mm-hmm.
and that's great and I love it and it makes me feel better. But often when it's emotional purchase because capitalism tries to sell something that we don't even end up using, you know, or
Right.
because, like you said before, because they're making us feel bad, like, you know, about ourselves, when the reality is we're beautiful or perfect, just, you know, great, just the
Yeah.
way we. And so it's like maybe that those are the moments too where, like you mentioned, if people practice what you're talking about, where they listen to their gut and be like, okay, what is my body feeling? And your gut will probably tell you, like, you know, it's going to be honest with you. It's like, oh, I'm only buying this because I'm making the ads making me feel bad, or
Right.
whatever. My job made me feel shitty, and so I feel like I need this to feel better. And so then when you're listening to your gut, it can be like, will this actually help? Or because that's what I talk about a lot too, is like some of the stuff like buying it does help, you know,
Mm-hmm.
um, relieve some stress, or, you know, like makes bring value to our lives. But then some of the purchases don't actually help. It's just covering up, you know, the root of the issue. And what we need to do is get to the root of the issue. And maybe the root of the issue is actually just quitting your job, or, you know, or setting a boundary. And maybe
Right.
that's another question, because like that's something I'm thinking a lot about, is like I've actually been on this journey of setting more boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like I tend to get sick when I'm stressed out.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, I'm really good. I only do things that I want to do, you know. And then my coach was like really pushing me, like, I don't think you're setting enough boundaries. And I was like, well, let me start being aware. And I realized, I was like, well, because I grew up having to like mature really fast, because I grew up in a really like home with a lot of abuse. And so I had to kind of mature and start like, you know, and feel like take care of people. And well, that's just me being a leader, you know, and taking responsibility and being in charge. And really, it was just a codependent behavior where I'm just taking care of others because it's all that I know how to do. And it's not actually being a leader. It's just I'm not setting the boundaries, right?
Right.
Because like, and I was thinking, I was actually talking about this with a client the other day, where it's like a leader actually isn't the workhorse doing all the work. It's who's like can step up and see that bigger picture
And
delegate, inspire, you know, and yeah, like really is in control. And if you're just doing all the work for other people, you're not actually in control.
Right.
And so it's a lot to think about. So it's like, okay, well, how do we set those boundaries with capitalism? I don't even know. How do we do that?
Yeah, well, it's, you know, you've hit on it already. It's like striking this balance between like, well, what do I need? And then like, where am I trying to go? And so sometimes it's like, I have this job that I can't quit because I have this bill and this bill and this bill. And oftentimes looking for a new job can be a job in and of itself, you know, and like, you don't get paid for that. And it takes time. And often it takes it takes you away from your other job. And if your current job finds out that you're looking for another job, they will fire you, you know? So it's like striking this balance between like what's realistic and then what it is that you're trying to achieve. And I think that very often, you know, and I see this in my friends sometimes where they're like, well, I'm going to do this kind of job because it'll make me money, or because like my parents consider it legitimate or something like that. And, you know, I say that with like such judgment, but it's like, it's not, I don't mean that. It's like, it's realistic, you know, and it's like based in, okay, you have student loans you have to pay off. And okay, if you do that type of work, then like your family will support you through school, or like, and those are the realities. But what that means, if you pan out a little bit, is that like this capitalist system that we're all trying to survive in is divorcing people from finding it, from their purpose. Like it's so hard for anyone to find what they love and what feels purposeful and meaningful to them, because they are, you know, making $15 an hour trying to pay rent in Los Angeles or New York or Chicago or Seattle, you know, like it prevents people from like living to their potential and doing the things that feel aligned.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I definitely, like, one thing I always recommend, like, it's hard, like you said, that looking for other jobs, it can often be like a whole other job. But if people have the capacity for it, I recommend, even if you like your job, constantly be looking for other jobs, just in the way, just to like keep that practice up, and just and remind yourself of the abundance. Like, oh, it's okay. Like you always have more emotional freedom when you're constantly like, even applying. I always say, apply to jobs that you're not going to take. That's okay. Because you always say, oh, sorry, you know what, I realized, you know, it's not the right fit for me after going through the process. And you can always turn it down. And then you could use it potentially for leverage at your current job to negotiate more. But at least it helps you with that the scarcity mindset, to remind yourself, you know, like
there are jobs out there.
Like, wait, there's jobs out there.
Yeah.
But this makes me think of, like, because as we were talking, I started just thinking about Instagram and all the ads, and, you know, how the algorithm, you know, I just, there's so many times where it's like, I look at like a kitchen pot, and then all of a sudden I'm getting ads for that pot everywhere, or that, you know, and there are ways to make it so, like, you know, I forget, you like erase the cookies or something. That every once in a while. Maybe I need to make a post on this, because like you're much less likely to be manipulated by those ads if it's some random thing that you're not even going to want being advertised versus something that's targeting you specifically because it knows that you thought about it, but then you thought about it, you just said, no, this is not the right purchase for me. And then they're still like,
Right.
no, but you do want it. And you're like, but I said no.
Yeah,
know?
I know.
And that's like make me think of like, oh my God, that was just like, no means no. And the ads are not like, they're not like practicing consent with us.
No, they're not. I mean, and like so many surveillance things are not consensual at all. I mean, yeah, like I do often think that Instagram is listening to me when like, I'll talk about something and then they, or yeah, I guess it's the cookies. Cause like if I look at something else, if I look at something on my phone on Safari, it'll start to show up on Instagram.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, so I'm gonna have to look up like how to erase cookies, like a search history or different stuff like that. So maybe I can make some materials for people because that can be a way. And I always talk a lot about like with my clients, I'm like unsubscribe from everything. If you really sign up for email list to get that 15% off, and then I immediately unsubscribe just because it's like then I'm going to be advertised to buy something that I don't actually want. If I really want something, I'll go find it. I'll find a way to get it. So yeah, and I'm trying to think if there's like other ways that we can set those boundaries with capitalism. I think part of it then, this made me think another thing is like having the conversations with our friends about this kind of stuff, because then our friends could, especially in my 20s, there's so much peer pressure of like, oh, you should buy this, you look so good in it, or oh, you should, let's go out to, just get another drink, even if you don't actually, want to. There's a lot of peer pressure around purchases, especially when we're younger, and having the conversation. And that's the thing is like, for not having conversation about this is what I want for myself financially, and this is where I'm at, this is how much I want to spend, and setting boundaries with our friends, our family, or even societal expectations to like buy gifts or spend for certain, like, there's so many, oh, you need to spend a lot of money for a wedding or for, or to buy wedding presents or, I see so many people are like, oh, I have to buy presents for all my friends' birthdays. And so, well, do you like it, or is that society's expectation of putting pressure on you, And so how do we have those conversations? Because it's like, I don't think our friends are coming from bad, places. That's what they realize to do too.
Right. Right. I mean, there are ways to get creative, like I think like there was a time when I was really into making granola. And so for my friends' birthdays, I would like use a recycled jar and I would make granola. And I was like, this cost me $1. And, here you go. You're welcome. I think there's like a lot of what you're talking about. Yes, it's like, yes, boundaries for sure. I think it also comes back to that thing of like checking in with yourself and being like, why do I feel like this is important? Is it a should? Like, am I shoulding myself? Am I saying like, oh, I'm supposed to do this for my friend, or shouldn't I be honored that I was invited, like those kinds of things. And really checking in with yourself, and the self-care stuff that you mentioned too is huge, because I think when we're sold self-care products and services, it taps into this like deferring to external authority stuff. And a lot of like, and I've dealt with that always, like, even in my dating life where I was dating older people. And so I was always sort of like, well, they must know something that I don't know, or like, I trust their judgment over mine. And then finding myself in situations where looking back, I'm like, I didn't really want to do that. And I just sort of thought like, this is what I'm supposed to want or something like that. And so with the self-care stuff, it's like, yes, okay, I'm going to pay a body worker to like give me a massage. But am I going to pay for like this face mask? Am I going to pay for this spa treatment? And sometimes the answer is and sometimes it's like, fuck yeah, I want to be pampered and I want it to be elegant and glamorous and I want all these fancy products and, and then sometimes it's like, well, am I trying to emulate something that I've seen on, you know, she's on everyone's minds right now, like that I saw Kim Kardashian do.
Oh, yes.
You know, and so like, so then it's like, if you check in with yourself and you're like, I really want that actually sounds amazing to me, great, do it. But if it's more of like a this is what you're supposed to do when you make money, right? You know, if it's a little bit more like dissociated and a little bit more like detached in a way from like what feels like genuinely aligned for you, then you know, just check on it. Like, it doesn't mean like it's a no, but it's like, just ask yourself where this came from. Like, where did this desire come from? Because a lot of our desires and preferences are societally constructed. We've learned it from advertising, from movies, from TV, from pop music. And I love pop music and I love stupid television, you know, but I think one of the problems is that we're not given like literacy around how to consume that stuff in a critical way.
Oh my God. That makes so much sense. I like that. I never thought about that way. We're not given literacy how to consume it in a critical way. Because it really fucking gets to you. Like, I was like so annoyed. I made a reel about Kim Kardashian's like people need to work, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm also fascinated about her. I mean, all like the stuff around her and Ye's divorce. As also, I'm really fascinated because he in his behavior reminds me of my father, and so I also empathy for her because I'm like, oh my God, like I see the emotional manipulation, the fucked up abuse, like I know exactly what that's like. I totally relate to all that, and I also love reality TV, so I may have just binged the Kardashians. Super critical and love watching the show. You know?
Yeah.
But like literally when I was watching it and like seeing all the clips of Kim and then Chloe talking about her nose job, I was literally like watching, I was like, should I get a nose job? Like,
isn't that incredible? Yeah. It's like, you know, there's ways that I think that phenomenon takes place in a really positive way. Like, I've seen so many people you know, discover like oh my God, I didn't have the language for transness until Tumblr, you know, and that's been a miracle and like literally life-saving for a lot of people, where they're like, I didn't realize that I was like trapped in this system or in this city or in this house where I wasn't allowed to like fully be myself, and you know, understanding like, oh my God, there are like surgeries and hormones and like things that I can do, and like it literally saves people's lives. And then it goes the other way where people are like, oh, I didn't know that I could like get a nose job or this surgery or that surgery, and it comes from a place of like implanting, almost like incepting these insecurities that then, you know, lead to someone profiting off of that insecurity.
It's fucked up, man.
Yeah.
Well, this has been like such a helpful conversation. I love it. I really appreciate you joining me. I wanted to, maybe we could both share for those who want to work with us.
Yeah.
There's such important work that you do. And I'm sure there are people who would want to take your classes or, you know, what's the best way if someone's interested? Like what kind of offers?
Yeah. Well, I do one-on-one coaching, like boundary coaching. I do classes, I do like long form programs, and then I do like one-off classes or intensives. So if you go to the link in my bio, you'll see a link that says classes. That'll take you to the one-offs that I'm offering. You'll also see a couple upcoming programs that I have. I'm currently offering a 4-week class that starts, I think, in May. I'm offering my educator training that starts April 18th. Applications are due April 12th. So that's like for coaches, healers, therapists, practitioners of any kind, anyone who wants to like build an anti-capitalist business to the best of our ability, anyone who wants to teach the things that I teach and learn how to like make money doing it. That's a 3-month program. You get private sessions with me, you get support creating curriculum, marketing, stuff like that. And then I also just launched a program, an 8-week program for men. And that's open to anyone who identifies as a man or gender expansive people who feel that they've been shaped by masculinity in a way that they want to like unpack in a group setting.
That's cool.
That also has some private sessions with me. And then I have some one-off classes. So I do have one in June that's a boundaries and your business class. And actually, Judy, if you want to take that class, let's talk.
Yeah.
That might be something that you might want to let your like mailing list know. I didn't even think about that. I should share that with you directly.
Yes, please send me the info.
So that one's a 2-day intensive, and it's all about like, it's about building an anti-capitalist business, and also like finding aligned projects and shirking this scarcity mindset around, you know, what's out there and what's available to you, figuring out who your audience is and your mission and all those things. And then I have a self-advocacy class coming up. It's a one-off, April 13th. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and you can find it all through the link in my bio.
And so if someone has some questions about your offer, should they DM, or what's the best way if they're like,
yeah, they can DM me or email me. Either way, my email is on my page, but you're welcome to DM me also.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm so excited. Really, let me know that, because that's what I'm trying to figure out like right now is like, okay, how do I set boundaries in my business? How do I figure out, what's, constantly figuring out like, how do I figure out the direction in a way that's good, that's constantly attracting the audience that I want. We've talked about that. For those who know, I'm always, I've had insecurities of like, if I share all this, like even like all the radical beliefs that I have, am I going to have people come after me? Like, I don't want the negativity from the conservatives.
Oh my gosh. No, I mean, that's like, we were chatting about that when we were DMing, like there's ways to communicate who you are and who your audience is, that will essentially filter out people like that. And you don't like, I had a lot of boundaries listed on my site that were sort of, that I've now discovered are like pretty unnecessary. Like, I don't need to say that like transphobia is not welcome in my class. Like it does say that on my site when you check out, but I'm like, oh, like look at who signs up for my classes. Like it's sort of, I'm clearly doing something right in that I don't actually have to deal with people that I'm afraid to deal with,
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And if anybody is interested in getting support in making a plan to reach financial freedom, learning how to budget, how to overcome that scarcity mindset, how to just finally really feel confident. I work with women and their partners, either individual women or women and their partners, if they want to include their partner in the coaching program, my group program, the Confident Money Club. And I help them. A lot of them have been afraid to check their bank account or like are nervous to see the status of finances. And then I help walk them through that process and through then becoming confident of like knowing how to budget in a way that's actually going to finally stick, learning how to pay off debt, how to save, how to set up good money habits, how to invest, all those things. So if any of y'all are looking for support on that, you can DM me, or there's an application at the link in my bio. The next round starts in April. I'm super excited. We already have a couple people in that round. So yes, I look forward to talking to more of y'all. And we need to I feel like we got to do more. This is amazing.
We can do this again. Yeah, absolutely.
That.